Hey everybody, it's Brandon, and in this video we're going to be taking a little bit of a deep dive on a particular kind of instrument, one that I have been very interested in for some time, just for kind of some interesting uses that it's had over time. And this is also a part of a very long list of other stringed instruments that I have growing now, of things that I do want to cover in a YouTube video at some point someday down the line. And at the turn of the new year for 2024, that's probably one of the biggest focuses that I have for the channel, is doing stuff like this with particular instruments. And with the blessing of my friend H from Late for Music here in Denver, I'm able to take a look at the past and present usage of the instrument known as the Bass 6. However, I do want you to keep in mind, for the purpose of this video and to kind of streamline things a little bit, I am going to refer to this kind of instrument all throughout as a Bass 6, and that's going to be an equal term, meaning this type of 6-string bass guitar, as well as baritone guitars, or rather, really long baritone guitars. And as we go along, if I need to specify further upon any particular brands or models, I will label those accordingly. So to get started, what is a Bass 6? Well, contrary to what I just kind of said, it's not necessarily a 6-string bass guitar, in the sense of maybe the most common definition of 6-string bass guitar. What you would normally see out of a 6-string bass is that, yes, you do have a 6-string bass guitar. However, usually they are tuned B to C, that is, maintaining the all-force tuning that the bass guitar has of E-A-D-G, like a guitar, and then they add the low B string and the high C string accordingly. But with this particular instrument, they usually come out of the factory tuned to E-A-D, GBE, which is similar to, as you would see with E standard on 6-string acoustic and electric guitars. However, this instrument is a whole octave underneath that. Also, 6-string basses that are tuned B to C typically have much wider necks, and the strings are further spaced apart. This particular instrument and type of instrument, however, has string spacing more akin to what you would see on electric guitars, so the strings are a little bit closer together. Does allow you to play some of the same chords and the like that you would be able to do on E standard guitar. And then, of course, while hardware configurations are going to vary depending on the make and model of the particular Bass 6 instrument you may be looking at, probably the most defining feature of this type of instrument is that they bear a 30-inch scale length, which again is meaning from the distance between where your string leaves the nut to where it makes contact with the bridge of the instrument. And then typically for production models, a 30-inch scale length is really just about as long as it gets for, say, buying a guitar of, well, any string configuration. And then on the flip side of that, 30-inch scale is actually going to be about as short as you get for, say, production models, typically of only just 4-string bass guitars. And then in a way, this instrument does kind of occupy a bit of a middle ground space at this scale, that is between, say, standard scale 24 3/4 or 25.5-inch scale length acoustic and electric guitars, and then the 34-inch standard scale for bass guitars. And then in a funny way, by occupying this middle ground, it's also a bit of a way for, say, bassists or guitarists who want to try out each other's instrument without having to commit the full way. This instrument can fill that role as they need to. The guitar company Den Electro were actually the first ones to take a stab at making this kind of instrument in 1956 when they released the U1, U2, and UB2 models. Subsequently, in 1961, Fender came out with the Fender Bass 6, which in a way also bore similarities to the Fender Jaguar, which would debut the following year. In particular, when comparing to the Fender Jaguar, the Fender Bass 6 kind of also had a similar deal going on, where they had the, what we now would classify as a vintage vibrato arm system on the guitar's bridge. And then additionally with that, they both had various switches around on the device, which were used for some tone controls at times, or even to, especially in the case of the Bass 6, just cut out a pickup signal entirely. Going even further on the switch control piece, the Bass 6 and the Jaguar by extension do also bear some similarities to a lot of Soviet Union guitars, which have a lot of switches on them. Not quite versed on Soviet guitars yet. That's something for another day that I hope to do on my channel. Unfortunately, however, it kind of seemed like maybe from the start that the Bass 6 was kind of doomed into being perhaps a niche instrument. Now, recalling that the Bass 6 got its start in 1956 and then 1961 through Den Electro and Fender respectively, well, unfortunately, the Fender Precision Bass had already been out since 1951, and the Jazz Bass, the Fender Jazz Bass that is as well, was out since 1960 prior to the release of this kind of instrument from Fender. Both the precision bass and the jazz bass had already kind of been runaway successes by this point, and in turn, the Bass 6 really didn't ever catch on to the same sales extent that those two instruments did. Still, as many musicians will tell you, if there's a piece of music technology out there that can be used, someone out there is going to find a use for it, and therefore the Bass 6 has seen use, not to a great extent, but through various sorts of genres such as country, classic rock, punk rock even to some extent, and more so even in indie rock, even going up all the way through the 2000s. Unfortunately, at the time that I'm choosing to make this video, I don't have the time or means to go through and do an exhaustive playthrough or demonstration of various tunes that used a Bass 6 in any context. However, I will make that up to you in that in the description of this video, there is a link to a really long Reddit post that has a very deep list of the Bass 6 being used in whatever context, be it through studio recordings or live performances. And then also, there's this really cool chronological video out there by music YouTuber Vicky Verino that you should definitely check out, because she does a great job cataloging how this instrument was used over the years. Thankfully, what I do have time for is that we are going to take a look at this instrument in terms of how it was used in a recording process, both in kind of something old school from the 50s or 60s, and then looking at something from the modern age of music today. Now again, while the Fender Precision Bass had already been introduced in the early 1950s, there were still a number of bassists out there, even in rock bands, that were still using the very large, very bulky, very cumbersome upright double bass. Now, while there are more refined pickup systems that do exist today and are more widely available for the purposes of, say, recording and amplifying upright bass for the longest time still kind of had to struggle along with, being able to be heard in a mix until about when Everett Hull, the founder of Ampeg, developed a pickup microphone system that was able to be used for, say, amplifying and recording upright bass. Yet still in the sense of recording upright bass, there's still the issue of that upright basses are naturally very low and bellowy instruments that really accentuate their low-end frequencies more than anything. But then enter the Bass 6, meant to give an edge in the recording process. To best describe how the Bass 6 was kind of first used in a recording context, I do want to turn it over to this cool clip from Ed Friedland's Bass Whisperer TV channel here on YouTube. And I've been a huge fan of Ed for some time, ever since I learned and picked up bass myself over a decade ago.
Talking about muted pick style, one of the most common uses of this whole genre of instruments is for Tic-Tac Bass. And it's a style that came into prominence in the early 60s in Nashville. They would do recording sessions with an upright player playing the regular bass line. And then they'd have somebody playing one of these, doubling their part. Sometimes they played a double time line, other times they matched the bass line exactly, and they played muted pick style, and that gave the bass note this click on the top end. Remember, this is before the electric bass was like the standard default instrument, and they were trying to give these country records a sound that would pop more through little car radio speakers.
And with what Ed just described, that's what I'm going to emulate in this video first, is the Tic-Tac Bass recording sound. As it's been sitting in my lap here all this time already, this is the particular Bass 6 model that I'm using in this video. It is the Harley Benton GuitarBass VS. Again, this was loaned to me by my dude H from Lake Fork Music here in Denver. Really cool guy. Earlier in 2023, we've done a couple of videos together, and one of them was some Harley Benton guitars that he brought over here one day, and this instrument was included in that. You should go check that out. But what really works great for me on this instrument is that I don't have to fuss with any of the additional switches that are on there. It's a real simple instrument, just 3 single coil pickups controlled by a 5-way pickup selector and a master volume and tone. Simple as it gets, and I love it. But because I don't own an upright bass, because again, large and heavy, I'm going to use the next best thing that I have, and that is this fretless ukulele bass. Again, this instrument will be the low bellowy sound of the upright bass, and then our lovely Bass 6 here will be the tic-tac that is overlaid on top. Specifically, I've come up with just a little quick 12-bar blues jam, which we're going to first listen to with just the drums and the upright bass. Then we're going to listen to the same little track again with the Bass 6 overlaid on top, in which I am playing a double timed part and also playing with a palm mute on my right hand. this video, I've also prepared another kind of more full band example of this recording technique in use. Specifically, I've chosen to make a quick rendition of the Etta James song I'd Rather Go Blind, or Tennessee Whiskey for you Chris Stapleton fans out there. This rendition is kind of a composite of both, but same as before, let's listen to it without the bass 6 and then with the bass 6. So nowadays, bass guitars come with all sorts of knobs and controls for various tone options and the like, and there are also things like preamp pedals which do the same thing, and all those things together do a very good job of accentuating middle and high range frequencies while keeping the core rumbly lows of bass guitar in the mix as you would want. As mentioned already, the bass 6 has had some uses, but to kind of go through a quick list of things that kind of apply to it being used in the most modern of examples, whether that be as a bass guitar or a baritone 6-string guitar. There's this particular video from Olivia Rodrigo in which there is a 4-string bassist and a bass 6 player playing together on the same track. Sergio Vega, formerly of Deftones, was also using a bass 6 for some time in that particular band's recording work. Almost every other modern example of the bass 6 being used in the modern sense was from indie rock specifically. It seems that they really love this thing. And of course, this talk of really long baritone guitars would not be complete for me personally without mentioning how Sleep Token in various live instances is using a 6-string baritone guitar of this length. And to look further at the modern usage of the bass 6 instrument, and also if you take a look at my back catalog of cover videos here on YouTube, you will obviously know that I'm a huge fan of modern metal music. Modern metal music has come to a point in many cases where we are trying to decide about how far low we can push the guitar to either match the register that bass guitar plays in, or in some cases even go lower than bass guitar. However, as many guitarists already know, the problem you run into when trying to pitch down from E standard and even go to the extreme lengths of doing so is that you need to increase the gauges of your strings in order to compensate for the string tension that would be appropriate to play those notes at. Otherwise, using an improper string gauge is going to cause your guitar to go viciously out of tune very quickly. Appropriate string gauges are really just about half the battle, but as modern music has also gone in the direction of, we've also made the guitars considerably longer in order to compensate for these super low tunings, while maybe at times getting away with using lighter gauge strings in order to have more clarity and not sound too overly muddy in a mix. As mentioned at the beginning of this video, most bass 6 instruments are typically at a 30-inch scale length, and for a point of reference with that, this particular Harley Benton that I've been using in this video is actually the same scale length and is just about as long as my 9-string Schecter guitar. Yeah, And personally, while I love dabbling with extended range guitars, I get it. Some guitarists are just not up to add strings on in order to tune lower, in that they just love the form factor of the 6-string, and I don't fault them for that. And thankfully for those who do want to keep the same form factor as a 6-string guitar, there has been an explosion in recent years of different sorts of 30-inch scale, bass 6 / baritone guitar instruments that are out there from all sorts of different manufacturers. And it's really cool to see what sorts of options are out there nowadays, especially at the various price ranges you can find these things at. And what's even better is a lot of them make for really cool mod platforms if I ever commit to buying one myself. Even at one point, Fender via Squier got interested in this concept by releasing the Squier Vintage Modified Baritone Jazzmaster. This particular instrument has been a long-running favorite for those who really like the 30-inch scale baritone guitars sort of deal. Though, if you are interested in getting that particular model, best of luck, as the resale market prices on these things have exploded since they've been discontinued for some time. And not just with that particular model, if we're still talking Fender. Fender has also kind of come around to re-releasing the Bass 6 instrument kind of in its more say initial incarnation, and there are plenty of people out there on YouTube who are making really cool videos with that particular instrument in the context of using it as a baritone guitar. While there are metal bands today, and perhaps even more so YouTube musicians who are using these 30-inch scale bass 6 / baritone guitar instruments in a metal mix along with the traditional 4 or 5 string bass sounds in the mix, perhaps the most prominent example that comes to mind of doing music that way is LOATHE. LOATHE is a metal band from Liverpool, England that has made extensive use of bass 6 / 30-inch scale baritone guitar instruments since they got started in 2014. They're also really awesome to see live, and I was fortunate enough to catch them when they came through Denver earlier this year at the Fillmore Auditorium, opening for, Chevelle and 3 Days Grace. Really cool show. I think they only had about a 30-minute set, if I recall correctly, but man, they made the absolute most of that, and it was awesome. Thankfully, while I still have this instrument on hand, and further with H's additional blessing for what I'm about to do here, I am super thrilled that I get to try this also in a baritone guitar context and also play LOATHE's music for the first time. However, this comes with the fun caveat that LOATHE does not use guitar tunings, or 6-string guitar tuning specifically, in any conventional way. You know, think of E standard tuning, E flat standard, D standard, or drop D, drop C sharp. Yeah. LOATHE doesn't do that. We're going to get really funky with the tuning here, and I had to do a little bit of extra research to do this accordingly. As we've gone over already, the Bass 6 usually ships in EAD GBE tuning, again, 1 octave underneath an E standard guitar. However, some models marketed as baritone guitars specifically will ship tuned to BAD F sharp B, which is only a 4th below E standard. But again, LOATHE, however, said screw all that and let's be different. To start off, the low E and A, as you see on the Bass 6 and also the 4-string bass, are tuned at the same pitch of E1 and A1. But then after this is where it gets really interesting. The 4th string is tuned to E2, the same note as the 6th string on an E standard guitar. Following that, the 3rd string is tuned to A2, the same as E standard's 5th string. Then the 2nd string is tuned to D3, and then the 1st string is at F sharp 3. To achieve this tuning at the 30-inch scale, I used a combination of single strings from both Ernie Ball and Kalium. While LOATHE additionally also uses some guitar tunings in higher registers, I should mention that LOATHE guitarist Eric Bickerstaff uses further variations of this particular tuning we're covering in this video, in which the lowest string is tuned down even further, including down to D1, C sharp 1, and B0, which is pretty wild.
Well, that actually worked. I was a little scared there at the moment, but
all the strings on and strung up properly. And so ultimately, what's the point for LOATHE to go through the trouble of figuring out this rather unique guitar tuning, and then on top of that, figuring out how that works in a metal mix? Well, it just so happens to be then that LOATHE has particularly built their sound on combining brutally heavy music and even then quite gentle music, and oftentimes jumping in between the two in the same song. And with that, here's a demonstration of what that looks like. Thanks everybody for watching this particular video. I truly hope you enjoyed it, and more so if you maybe have not been familiar with this instrument in any way, I hope you learned something out of it, because I learned a whole hell of a lot going into this project, just about how this instrument was used in its various recording capacities. Ultimately, with the LOATHE song that I chose to cover both for this video and independently as its own cover video, I would love to hear your feedback on that, because I'm not particularly one to use single coils at all. Single coil pickups, that is. I'm usually ride or die for my humbuckers, so let me know what your thoughts are on that, because I don't know, maybe the single, I know people are kind of high on the single coils for this kind of stuff that LOATHE does. At least for some time, LOATHE has also used particular long guitar models that have single coil pickups, or P90s even, somewhere in that mix. So as someone myself who is interested in eventually owning one of these types of instruments because of how much I've really come to enjoy LOATHE's music, I don't know, we'll weigh those options depending on what people think. But ultimately, this video was a bit of a jumping off point to hopefully start looking at more unique stringed instruments that are out there. I've got a whole list again of stuff I really want to look at in YouTube videos, and I think this is the greatest way to start that off at the turn of the new year. So if you have any other notable stringed instruments that you may know of, certainly drop a comment on that as well, because that list is growing and I would love to keep it going. And as always, thank you for either the new and or continued support on all the videos here on my channel, because new year, new me. I hope there's a lot more that I can cover on upcoming videos here on YouTube. But until then, I will see you in the next video.